everyone, and welcome to our very first parent meetup. My name is Tui Pham and I am the founder of Spectrum Tuition. I'm so excited to be here today to speak to you today about VCE subject selection to maximise your Atar. So firstly, before we get started, I just want to thank Harrison from Stone and Chalk for hosting us at tonight's event. It's an amazing space, and I really want to thank you, Harrison, for helping us get all of this sorted. Now, I want to start off today's session by just doing a really quick brainstorming session. So what I want you to do is think about the teacher who inspired you the most while you were at school. All right, so which teacher had the biggest impact on your life? And I just want you to just think about that person. So the person who inspired me was probably my grade 4 teacher. So I remember the teacher had organised bank books for us all throughout the year. So every time we did something positive, like we did our homework, he would assign it a dollar amount, so $10 for example. And then at the end of the term, he would bring in some prizes and we would have an auction. So based on how much money we had accumulated throughout that term, we could then redeem them for prizes. And there was also, you know, like we learnt about debits and credits, and it was really, really amazing. So what I want you to do is firstly introduce yourself to the person next to you and talk to that person about who your most inspirational teacher was growing up. Okay, so I'll let you have a brief chat. All right, just a couple more seconds. All right, we might just wrap that up now. Okay, I hope you're all feeling really, really inspired by each other's stories. And wouldn't it be great if every single year we had an inspirational teacher like that, okay? But if you're anything like me, I also had some uninspiring teachers. I remember just in the following year in grade 5, I was in a composite grade 5-6 class, and my brother, who also started Spectrum Tuition with me, you know, he was in grade 6, I was in grade 5, we were in a composite class, and I remember we had a teacher who just gave us worksheets all throughout the year without giving us any explanation as to what this worksheet was all about. And so that was how the whole year was. And I remember a really rare occasion where she actually was at the board and was trying to teach us something. And the topic was adding fractions with uncommon denominators. And I remember her struggling quite a lot with the concept. And I remember she did something wrong, and my brother, you know, he's always been really, really clever, and he's always picked things up really, really quickly. He was trying to help her out, and she was just fumbling and struggling. And in the end, she just said, "Tien, do you want to come up and teach the class?" And so my brother actually came up and taught the class how to do this particular sum. So, you know, and I remember one of my classmates who was in year 6, and she was so lost throughout the year that she decided that she had to redo year 6 at another school so that she could be prepared for high school. And unfortunately, you know, the reason why this happens, you know, I had a fantastic experience the previous year and then a not so great experience the following year, is because, you know, in Australia, the educational system, the onus is on individual teachers to set the learning program for their individual students. So if you have a fantastic, motivated teacher, then that's great, but there may be years where you may not. All right, so, you know, at the moment it's very inconsistent and fragmented, and the standards can vary considerably from one school to the next, and even from one teacher to the next within that same school. So Spectrum Tuition exists because we want to give students a fighting chance to succeed within this fragmented system. So what we've done is we've created an educational system to give all students a consistent and structured learning program to help with scholarships, with select entry programs, with NAPLAN, VCE, and also for general tutoring. We ensure consistency by hiring top performing university students who are enthusiastic and passionate about their subject matter. So, you know, because I had that experience in grade 5, I wanted people who were very knowledgeable to be able to teach all of the classes. You know, there wouldn't be, or it'd be very, very rare to have that situation at Spectrum. We have a system for teaching the tutors how to teach within the context of our structure and our classes. So we hire for enthusiasm and we train for skills. So it's not enough just to have high-performing university students. We have a whole system on how to deliver our program to our students in classes. So our centres are located across Melbourne. So in 2019, we'll have 7 centres in Melbourne. So we've got Footscray, Hoppers Crossing, St Albans, Keysborough, Oakley, and next year we'll be opening up 2 new centres in Brunswick and Broadmeadows. So the way it works is we would firstly start off with a free assessment where we would test students over 3 year levels. So if your child is in year 5, we would give them the year 4 to year 6 test just to see where the gaps have started and also to see whether we can extend the students further. The classes are then streamed based on ability, so that we then place students into classes based on their abilities. Students are given booklets aligned directly to the Victorian curriculum, and students are given weekly assessments where results are posted online for parents to have a look at and track. So if you do want to know more, you can meet our managers who are just sitting at the back there, our tutors and our franchisees. You can talk to existing parents. So existing parents will have the Spectrum logo on their name tag, and you can view our course books and programs just at the back there as well. And tonight, if you are new to Spectrum, you can book in a free assessment and you'll get a $50 gift certificate to use towards the following term or the following year's fees. And also there's a special offer for all of our new, for anybody who's interested in joining one of our new centres. So if you register your interest online and pay a $50 deposit, then you'll get a $150 voucher to use towards the following term's tuition fees. So if you can just jump onto spectrumtuition.com/Broadmeadows or spectrumtuition.com/Brunswick, you can then register your details. If you just register your details and you don't leave a deposit, then you still get a $20 voucher sent to you. All right, so let's get on with the main part of today's presentation. So what I want you to do is to meet Karen. So Karen is currently in year 7. She enjoys cooking at home, she enjoys drawing, but she also might want to work with animals at some point in the future. And she's feeling a little bit lost as to what she might want to do with her life. So her grades are fairly consistent, so her teachers have offered her the opportunity to do year 12, either year 12 business management, legal studies, biology or accounting this year, but she's opted to not take the school up on this offer because she just doesn't want the added stress of a year 12 subject while she's doing year 11. So instead, she's just opted to do 5 subjects. So she's decided to do English, food technology, studio arts, chemistry, and further maths. So when choosing subjects for VCE, it's really important to ask yourself the following questions, and I'm going to be explaining this in the context of Alice in Wonderland. So if you're unfamiliar with the story of Alice in Wonderland, it goes a little bit something like this. So there's the character Alice who stumbles into a land of make-believe, where she encounters characters like the Mad Hatter, the White Rabbit, and also the Queen of Hearts. But it's this character here who has the most insight, in my opinion. Who knows who this character is? Do you know who this character is? Cheshire Cat, okay? It's the Cheshire Cat. So the Cheshire Cat has the most insight because at some point in the story of Alice in Wonderland, she reaches a fork in the road and she has to decide whether she goes left or whether she goes right. And so she's in a state of panic. And so she looks up just to see whether she can have any sign, and her eyes meet with those of the Cheshire Cat. And she says to the Cheshire Cat, "Which way do I need to go, left or right?" And the Cheshire Cat says, "Well, it depends." And then Alice responds with, "It depends on what?" And the Cheshire Cat says, "Well, it depends on where you want to go." And she said, "Well, I don't know where I need to go. Tell me which way to go." And then the Cheshire Cat responds with, "If you don't know where you are going, any road will take you there." So let's look back at Karen's situation. So Karen doesn't really understand how the Atar is calculated. She lacks a bit of direction, so she was kind of just choosing a random mishmash of subjects based on what she was interested in. And based on this, because she doesn't have a clear direction as to which way she needs to go, she's likely just to meander through the next couple of years of her life while she searches for a suitable pathway. So firstly, we need to work out how the ATAR is calculated in order to then maximise your score. So the ATAR, if you're unfamiliar, stands for the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank, and that's a score that you need in order to get into tertiary courses, and that's based on up to 6 VCE results. So English, an English subject, whether it's English, English literature or English language, is counted no matter how well you perform. So English is counted in your primary 4. And then your 3 next top scoring subjects, okay, which together will form your primary 4 subjects. And then it's 10% of the scaled study scores for any 5th and 6th subject. And these are called increments. So Karen is only doing 5 subjects, so already she's at a disadvantage because she's missing out on that last 10% increment, which could mean the difference between getting into the course of her dreams and not. So, as mentioned, she's doing English, food technology, studio arts, chemistry, and further maths. So what we need to do is we need to maximise our score, because it doesn't matter if you don't have a very clear idea of exactly where you want to go. And a high ATAR represents choice. So if you can score, if you can do the best possible job that you can and score the highest possible score, then a score of 90 will open you up to a whole bunch of different tertiary courses, as opposed to a score of, say, 50. 50 limits your choices considerably, right? Whereas even if you don't know what you want to do, a score of 90 opens you up to a world of possibilities. So the way it works is, for each subject, students will achieve a scaled study score out of 50 for each of their subjects based on SAC and exam scores. So SACs are school assessed course work. Okay, so they are projects that you need to do during school time. So study scores are actually a rank which shows the student's performance compared with all of the other students who took the subject in that same year. So it's marked on a bell curve. Okay, so that's really important because the average score is always 30, and the highest result in a subject, so just say your child achieved the highest result in a particular subject at the score of, say, 80%. Okay, so if that was the highest score, then your child will achieve that score of 50. Okay? So because some subjects are seen to be more difficult than others, some subjects will be either scaled up to reflect this level of difficulty, or they will be scaled down. So for example, a subject like specialist maths, which everybody can agree is very difficult, is scaled up by about 11 points, whereas a subject like studio arts, which is known, which people would view to be a lot easier than specialist maths, is scaled down. So it's not, so according to VCAR, it's not fair for a student who's studying specialist maths to be, marked at the same level as a student who's doing studio arts, which is why scaling exists. So scaling exists so that it's equally easy to attain a high ATAR regardless of the combination of subjects that a student undertakes. And it's important to note that higher scores are scaled down less. So the better your child performs in that particular subject, the less it will be scaled. So for example, if your child gets a 49, then it'll probably just get scaled down to 48, for example, for these subjects that are viewed to be a little bit easier. So now that we've got all of that information, I can now explain to you how the ATAR is calculated. So the scaled study scores are combined to produce an ATAR aggregate, which is a number between 0 and something over 210. All students are then ranked in order according to this aggregate, And then the percentage rank is converted to an ATAR, which is the number between 0 and 99.95. So an ATAR of 90 indicates that the student has performed better than 90% of students. So this is just a sample ATAR calculation. So this particular student chose 6 subjects for their VCE, which is a really great start. So they chose, so we've got the subjects on the left-hand side, we've got the study score that they achieved, their scaled study scores, and then what that contribution was to their scaled aggregate. So for English, they achieved a study score of 38, and that went down to 37. Economics, they scored 42, and that went up to 43.6. Chemistry, they achieved 36, which went up to 40.8. And maths methods, they scored 35, and that went up to 40. And then, so those 4 subjects are the primary 4. And then you've got your increments. So you've got specialist maths, where the student scored 26, and then that went up to 37.2, so that went up by 11 points. And then you've got studio arts, where the student scored 40 and the scaled study score was 37. So you can see here the scaled aggregate was 168.8, and that was converted to a very respectable 93.8, okay, which definitely opens you up to a lot of possibilities. But I think that if the student had have understood how the subject selection process worked, they probably would have achieved a higher result than 93.8. So you can see here that with economics, they scored 42. That was their top performing, that was their highest mark. Even though it only got scaled up by a little bit, it was still their highest result. And so compare that with specialist maths. So that was their lowest scoring result, and it only went up to 37, which was their, the second lowest score in the end. So given that they scored 42 for economics, you can kind of conclude that this student is, quite skilled with business or commerce type of subjects. So maybe instead of doing specialist maths, where it's very time consuming and very difficult, that student probably could have chosen to do accounting or something like that, where their scaled score might have been closer to the 40, and they would have, that may have reached the primary 4 subjects. Another thing to look at is studio arts. So studio arts, the student, that was their second highest raw score that they achieved, but that was equal lowest mark overall. So they only achieved a score of 37 in the end, and that was what the contribution was. The problem with a subject like studio arts is that you can't really study for that subject. It's very subjective, and it's very time consuming as well. So with VCE, unless you have an absolute real talent in that area, you'd probably want to steer clear of subjects that could be picked up as hobbies, particularly if you want to do a fairly serious university course. So instead of doing a subject like studio arts, another subject that might come in handy is a subject like further maths. So if anybody knows how further maths works, it's the lowest of the 3 maths. And if you have a look through the sample exams on the VCAR website, because you get all of the exams for the past 10 years, it's equivalent to about a year 10 level. So if your child has, quite good skills in maths, it might be a good idea for them to choose further maths instead, because further maths is a subject that you can get the top score in. You can answer. There's an actual answer behind the questions. Whereas a subject like studio arts, it's very subjective, so you can't really study for it. So you can get 100% for further maths and get that 50 for further maths. Does that make sense? So even though it is a very respectable 93.8, with those 2 changes, that would have boosted that student's results a lot higher, and a whole lot of other courses may have been available for that student. So the full scaling report if you just go to Google, you just search for the VTAC scaling report and it will go through, you know, what each subject will be scaled up or down to. Just one more point with this particular area is that you may think, okay, well, I may as well just choose all the subjects that get scaled up. You know, that's a bit of a mistake because, you know, even though a subject like specialist maths does get scaled up really high, that student would have spent a lot of time just understanding the concepts. And that would have taken away from the other subjects. So if specialist maths was off the table, they probably would have been able to spend a little bit more time on English. You know, English is probably the most important subject when you're thinking about VCE, and that would have also boosted up the student scores a little bit more. So how can we help Karen? Firstly, we need to work out what areas of study she's interested in. Okay, so with your child, whatever they're interested in, doesn't matter, computers, sport, you go to vtac.edu.au and just look at the course search, and then you just type in the keyword. So the keyword could just be something like food or computers. And then what will happen is that on the side, there will be the search results for that particular keyword. So here I've just put veterinary science in here because, you know, earlier you can remember, if you remember, Karen was interested in working with animals maybe at some point in the future. So as long as we know what the entry requirements are, we can work towards those. And then you need to find out what courses are centred around your interests. So for Karen, maybe she might be interested in veterinary medicine. And then what you need to do is find out what the prerequisite subjects are to gain entry into this particular course. So you can see here that firstly you need to do a Bachelor of Science, which is 3 years minimum duration, and then the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, which is 3 years after you finish the Bachelor of Science at the University of Melbourne. And then you can have a look to see how the Atar, how that plays a role in the entry requirements and what else you need to do. So it says here that there's a guaranteed Atar here. If you receive an Atar of 98.5 or higher and complete all the requirements for this course, then you will be guaranteed an offer. So after the student does the initial 3-year science degree, then if they achieve a score of 98.5, then they're guaranteed. If you don't achieve a score of 98.5, then you'll need to do another test called the GAMSAT, okay, before you can be offered a place. And then you need to have a look at prerequisite subjects. So the Year 12 prerequisite says that you need a study score of at least 25 in chemistry and physics. So what was wrong with Karen's subject selection if she wanted to get in? She only chose to do chemistry, she didn't have physics with her. So it says here that if physics is not completed in Year 12, students will need to complete a level 1 physics subject in first year. If you don't have any background in physics and you really want to do veterinary medicine, they will fly through the entire Year 12 physics course in the first 2 weeks. So if your child is interested in doing a subject like veterinary medicine, it's important to figure out what the prerequisite subjects are before you, when you're doing your preferences. And then you need to find out whether your school offers the opportunity to complete one of your subjects early. Okay, so even though biology wasn't a prerequisite to get into the course, you can be guaranteed that they will be doing biology in veterinary medicine. Yeah, and the same sort of situation. If she hasn't chosen to do biology at Year 12, they will fly through the entire Year 12 curriculum in 2 weeks. The reason why is because all the other students, there are other students in the cohort who has spent an entire year doing biology. They're not going to wait around for you to catch up. So you need to think long term when you're choosing your subjects so that it makes life at university easier as well. So I remember this, and the reason why I have to stress this is because when my first course was in commerce, so my major was in accounting, and I didn't choose to do accounting in year 12. So I was really struggling through the first year because they went through the entire 2 weeks of accounting, and it was really, really difficult. So don't make it difficult on yourself. Make sure that you're choosing subjects long term, and you've got a forward thinking view of things. So for Karen, you know, it's a good idea for her to take the school up on the offer to do year 11 biology, because the reason why is so that you have that opportunity to at least have the experience of doing a year 12 subject. You know, it's only one subject and you have the experience of doing it, as opposed to waiting until year 12 and then finding that, oh my gosh, I've got SACs to do, I've got exams to study for. It's a completely different experience from year 11, because in year 11 you just need to pass. You don't, it's nothing to do with, you just have to pass, but it's not as much pressure as a year 12 subject. So, doing a subject early will definitely put you in the right frame of mind, so that even if you bomb out in that subject, at least you know that you need to pick it up in year 12 with your subjects, okay? And so step 5, let's choose some subjects for Karen. So in year 11, I would suggest that she chooses biology. In year 12, she can study English, maths methods, physics, chemistry, and further maths. So even if your child's teacher says to your child, you're doing really, really well in maths, you should choose specialist maths. You don't actually need specialist maths to do veterinary medicine. You don't need specialist maths to do medicine. You only need specialist maths if you're picking up an engineering degree. And specialist maths is really, really difficult. All of my tutors who have taken up specialist maths and who haven't gone on to study engineering have just said it was just a mistake. Even though these tutors have achieved really, really top marks, they probably would have achieved higher results if they hadn't have chosen that, because it's so time consuming and it takes away from the other subjects.
Which one is specialist in math?
Oh, I didn't choose that for her. So here are some sample subject combinations, just for a whole bunch of different degrees. So medicine, vet science, dentistry, optometry. You would choose either English or English language, maths methods, chemistry, biology, physics, and either further maths, psychology, health or human development. So the reason why you should do all 3 sciences if you're doing one of the health sciences is because after your initial biomedicine or science degree, to gain entry into one of these courses, you need to sit this GAMSAT, which will test you on all of those. So I've actually had a few of my tutors who didn't study either physics or didn't study biology, but they have to compete against, other students who have been doing, all of those 3 subjects plus a couple of years of these subjects at uni. So don't make it hard on yourself. If you know what you want to do, even if you change your mind, as long as you've got some idea of what you want to do, it's good to have some sort of plan moving forward. So, suggested commerce pathway, either English or English language, maths methods, accounting, economics, further maths, and any one of IT, business management, legal studies, or a language. Okay. Suggested engineering pathway, English, English language, maths methods, specialist maths, physics, further maths, and any one of IT, environmental science, economics, and geography. Again, if you're thinking of studying engineering, you need to do specialist maths in year 12, because in first year uni, it's all about maths and you are going to be really behind. Okay, so think about what you're going to be doing at uni when you're choosing your subjects. And then a suggested law pathway. English, legal studies, economics, politics, maybe history, revolutions, and any one of IT, environmental science, geography, further maths, psychology, or a language. So what have we learnt so far? We've learnt that we cannot neglect English, no matter what. English must be one of your top 4 subjects, and a poor performance in English will impact your ATAR more dramatically than any other subject. I remember I had a tutor once who achieved a score of 99.05. He scored 38 in English and 4 50s. 4 50s, got 99.05. That's how dramatically English, a poor score in English will affect your ATAR. He could have gotten 99.95 if it had have just been those 4, but because one of those 50 scores has to be an increment, that's what brought his score down dramatically. That's how much it impacts your ATAR. We also have learnt that you need to choose the right number of subjects. You need to choose 6 subjects in your ATAR. If your school, there are some schools that will not allow you to do 6 subjects, you need to fight to do 6 subjects. Okay, so there are some schools that say, oh, we don't believe in giving your child, we don't believe in doing a Year 12 subject early. See if you can get that done, okay? Because doing 6 subjects or you can do 6 subjects in Year 12, but always try to do 5 subjects in Year 12 and 1 subject in Year 11. High subject scores are not scaled down, so even if the subject scales down, the top score is still the top score. So even though there are scores, you might see in that scaling report that some scores go down, some scores go down by 4 or 5 marks. If your child is passionate about the subject and gets the top score, then it stands as is. And then in a subject where competition is low, this may be an opportunity to maximise your ATAR. So if your child does a subject like health and human development, it's not really competitive, or a subject like geography, or a subject like environmental science, there's not a lot of competition in those types of subjects. So if you can strive to try and get that top score, then you can get a 50 in that score, in that particular subject. We've learnt that you also need to maximise your time as well as your ATAR. So avoid time-consuming subjects like specialist maths and literature unless you absolutely need it. Choosing subjects just because they scale up may backfire. It may be better to choose subjects that better align with your course and that you enjoy and that you can actually study for. And now we've got a special announcement. So we just launched our podcast last night, and you are the very first people to know about it. So you can listen to, if you go to spectrumtuition.com/episode-1, you can get a link to all of these areas where the podcast can be listened to. So you can listen to it in Anchor, Apple Podcasts, in Spotify, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Overcast, Radio Public, Pocket Casts and Stitcher. So I would really, really appreciate it if at some point tonight you can subscribe, and after you listen to it, leave a review. So on the way home, maybe have a listen to it and leave a review. That would help in getting the word out there and helping other parents like yourself learn more about what's happening in the Australian education system. So today, just to wrap up, if you want to book in a free assessment, you will get a $50 gift certificate just for today. Subscribe to our podcast for monthly episodes about the latest educational news, and also give you some study tips that you can listen to in the car with your kids on the way to school, for example. So each episode will only be, about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes long. And if you have any questions about any of the content, please complete a question slip and post it in the box, and we'll go through the questions before we start the next section. And just make sure that you write your name on the slip. And our Q&A with our parent will start in 10 minutes. So, so just have a bit of a break, have some more pizza and a drink, and we will come back in about 10 minutes.